Thank you all for coming. My name is Ryan McGahey, and I am the News and Sports Director at RadioWorks, and I'm here on behalf of Forward Worthington. We've been doing this, as I mentioned, for a number of years. This is called a legislative forum. Used to be Eggs and Issues. You can call it what you want, but it's a chance to interact with your legislators and ask them questions. And certainly there's a lot to potentially talk about this morning. And we head into what's going to be a big year, 2026, not just for the state of Minnesota, but for all the country. So good to have you all here this morning. So let's start with District 21 Senator Bill Weber from Laverne. Bill.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you again for the invitation from Forward Worthington to be here. And certainly I'm going to be going into my 14th session when we take off on February 17th, and have always enjoyed representing the people of Southwest Minnesota. There's a lot of issues. Quite frankly, Minnesota has been in the national news for all the wrong reasons in the past couple of months. And I know that there are a lot of questions out there as it relates to a variety of issues. And so rather than take a whole bunch of time, talking about what might come in front of us, I think I'm just going to stop it and we'll answer the questions because I'm sure there'll be plenty.
Thank you. Let's go to District 21B, Representative Marge Fogelman from Fulda.
Thanks, everybody, for being here. This is a great crowd, and it's great to see everybody. I got a lot of emails from some Fulda students, so hopefully they got my responses. So that is always wonderful to see kids in the audience and being involved in what's going on in our government. And I will echo what Senator Weber said, that we'll just keep this short and ready for questions.
And Senator, Representative.
Not at this time.
Not at this time. District 21A, Representative Joe Schomacher of Laverne.
Well, thank you. And thank you for showing up this morning for this. It's always better when there's more people here. Sometimes these events get a little lonely. I am curious, though, with Representative Fogelman, if she answered those questions from the Fulda students, what is your favorite shoe style?
Oh, it wasn't favorite shoe. It was favorite from... It was LA Gear from way back in the day.
Now we all know her shoe's secret. I've been serving for 16 years in the Minnesota House and currently serve as the co-chair for the Human Services Committee. Because the legislature the House is split evenly 67-67, it offers completely new dynamics or unique dynamics this year than what we've seen in the past, but basically every single week, no matter whether we're in session or not, it seems that we have unique dynamics to deal with, and so let's get to the questions.
Excellent. All right, well, I've got two so far, so keep them coming. Otherwise, if you don't ask questions, I'm going to have to come up with stuff, and that can get a little scary. We'll start with, will there be an opportunity to cut the budget at all during the session? And let's start with Senator Weber.
Well, at this point in time, number one, we need to remember that this isn't a budget year. Sometimes there are supplemental budgets that are offered. I doubt that there will be too much activity in that regard. Right now, the last forecast that came out showed that we would be okay at the end of this fiscal year, but that there is still the potential for deficit in future years. With that being the case, I doubt that there will be an appetite for a lot of additional spending. Perhaps there are some things that need to get covered. Some shortfalls that have arisen that will be looked at, but I don't think there will be a tremendous amount of budget activity.
Joe.
I would concur with that. I think that the dynamics of the legislature this next year, not only with being evenly split, but the number of people who are running for a different office or not running at all, that changes the dynamics dramatically throughout the year. And since there isn't a constitutional requirement to balance the budget this year, since we've already done that this last year, I think that the opportunity for a lot of change is not on the table. I do think that there will be some supplemental pieces to address what's happening at the federal level, and so we may see some action with that, but it's going to be more limited, especially given the deficit that is looming over the state next year.
Marge, anything you'd like to add to that?
Well, I agree with everything that they said, but that doesn't mean that we can't start looking now at what we can do in the future. So hopefully we can look at things that we can change to make our budget better in the next biennium.
Couple of questions have been submitted about the data center project here in Nobles County, and are you all familiar with the data center project that's been proposed? One question asks, is it something that Nobles County needs? And then another one asks, what is the current status? I guess, Marge, we'll start with you, I guess. With the data center, I don't know if there's any position you guys can take or do, but why don't you answer that question for me?
I don't really have a position on it, but I have met with Geronimo, the company that is bringing the data center to Nobles County. I encourage everyone to reach out to them directly because that's what they wanted people to do, so they had more information on what it meant. They feel it's going to bring jobs and it's a needed service. I think that I would leave that up to you as citizens to look into that and ask them directly.
Joe?
Yeah, I would concur with Marge that Geronimo does, from my conversations with them, want people to reach out to them directly to get feedback and to provide answers. I think that anytime there's a startup of some sort, there's going to be the people who got in first that made the mistakes, and those have to be dealt with, but that's what gets carried on throughout. We had this conversation a lot in the early 2010s about wind energy and the issues there, where our side of the state had a very different perspective than what people on the other side of the state had on what wind energy should be and what that should look like and what kind of regulation should be there. And I'm seeing a lot of the same things start up here, where the communities start to hear about the bad actors or the bad scenarios, the bad cases, and that's what the overwhelming consensus is, because groupthink is so prevalent. But the people who succeed are the ones who learn from that and build from that. And I do feel like that's the attempt here with this project so far. From what I've seen, is that there is the intent at least to be good actors and to make this really a win-win-win for everyone involved.
Senator Weber, anything to add?
Well, I know that there are differing opinions in the public as to the idea of data centers, period. I think it's important for us as elected officials to recognize that we might be against something or we might be for something, but the reality of it is data centers are an element that is going to be in our economy. And so as a result, we as elected officials have a responsibility to look at the overall picture and say, try to accentuate the qualities, the good points of them, and try to mitigate any problems that might occur as a result of them being here. People talk about, well, we don't have enough energy, or our electric rates are going to go up. Well, you know, my experience in 16 years of local government, we had a municipal-owned electric department. You know, you have the ability, what affects your rates is the fact that you have to build to meet your peak loads. And building the necessary facilities, whether it's generation or transmission, is a very expensive item. And so that's what leads to raises in utility rates. The one thing about a data center is, yes, they require a lot of electricity, but they're a consistent user. They're going to be running 24 hours a day. And so I think that the idea about it's going to raise your electric rates is not necessarily totally valid. And so there's a lot that goes into the equation as we evaluate this. The reality of it is they're going to have a number of permits from the state of Minnesota, whether it's the MPCA, Department of Commerce, probably, I don't know if the DNR gets involved there before they're done or not. But it'll be something that is going to be looked at very carefully. And Lord knows, Minnesota is not very prompt in getting permits turned around. So I don't know when it'll happen. But anyway, I think data centers are something that are going to happen. We're going to have to figure out how to deal with them. And as a state, how regulations need to be put into place to safeguard, quite frankly, the residents around them.
Next question. This is kind of a two-parter, but they're certainly connected. What checks and balances will be put into place to protect taxpayer money? And with that, what transparency strategies will be put into place to regain the trust of taxpayers? Let's start with Representative Schomacher this time.
Yeah, that's a big question, and something that I've been wrestling with for at least the last year on just how we approach that. There were a few good things that we were able to accomplish this last session when we saw the issue of fraud becoming more and more prevalent. Before a lot of this stuff came out in the news, we were trying to do a lot more proactive pieces, but it was a big part of the focus in the session this year. That's why we have a fraud committee in the House to look into some of these things a little bit more deeply. So some of the things that we had worked on this last session that will hopefully overall help with the protection of taxpayer dollars is looking at some of the kickback pieces that were in the state that we had before, working on some of those things. The federal government changed the way that they allowed for or disallowed for kickbacks. So if someone is a client that's receiving services and that person also has, say, a housing unit attached to the services that they offer, they can say, they could say, hey, why don't you get services from me and we'll do the housing, and then that referral for the housing got a kickback for that. And we've made those types of things illegal. Literally the way the administration wanted it when they put together the legislation in the first place to connect with the federal government on this, they defined a kickback as a kickback, which doesn't tell you anything. And so for as complicated as some of this stuff is, we had to take about 2.5 months just to define what a kickback was going to be for that. And so we have that law that came into effect just a couple of days ago on the 1st. We also raised the licensing rate for providers, and the intent with that was to do a few different things. And so that money goes into a special revenue fund for the state. It doesn't go back to the general fund, into a special revenue fund, and that's used for IT, so that the systems are more up to date for providers to be able to file their claims with the state more accurately. There was also more training on accounting, because some of the things we found that were coming up and showing up as fraud was really just they wrote AM instead of PM on the sheet, and it was unintentional. It wasn't malicious. It just was a mistake. But in our statute and the way we operate, that was listed as fraud. But the service was still provided. The bigger issue is when the service isn't provided and we're being charged for that. There's also more training and support for those providers to be able to file accurately, and more auditors out of those new rates to be able to audit what's going on within the system. Our focus was primarily over the Medicaid-based pieces with our waiver systems within that. I think this next year, as we look into more of it, we'll be transitioning into the grant services that the state offers. We just had a OLA report yesterday that came out about behavioral health and the amount of inappropriate activity that's going on within the behavioral health community, not only within the people who are providing the services, but also from the department themselves. And so when the auditors went in, they found that people who work for the state, who are supposed to be on behalf of the state in services and protecting taxpayer dollars, were fabricating documents to prove that the services that they paid for were actually being paid for. And those types of things, again, that report just came out yesterday, those types of things can't continue to happen. And so there needs to be more accountability on those pieces of it. Moving forward, just seeing how the negotiations went in the human service area this year and what we knew then and the information we had then versus what we know now and the information we have now from independent sources. The story we get when we're trying to negotiate a budget on behalf of the taxpayers of Minnesota is solely from the administration. And we've known this is a problem. That's why we set up the Legislative Budget Office about 7 or 8 years ago. And it would be my intent to get people who are operating from the Legislative Budget Office on behalf of the legislative branch to have a position within the executive branch to oversee those things so that we have a more independent source for the types of information that we get. Because of course the administration, no matter who is in the administration, they're going to paint the rosiest picture. And it's our job to be skeptical, but it would be better if we could be skeptical with some data to back up the claims there. It's difficult when you have one or two people who flag an issue or are a whistleblower to things to be able to ramp that up as more than just anecdotal. And so we're starting to see that there is more than just anecdotal situations going on, but we would be better served, the taxpayers would be better served, the legislature would have the ability to do its job better if we had some kind of more independent source within and not just taking the word of the department for these things. And so that's one area that I'll be pursuing this next year to see what we can do to get the legislature to be more involved in this process without that separation of powers issue that I've been lectured about before.
All right, Senator Weber, I imagine you have some thoughts on all of this as well.
Well, I do. And the reality of it is that there are two elements that we have to deal with here. Number one, I think we have to deal with those who have acted inappropriately within state government to allow this situation to develop in the first place. In the Senate, we passed a bill last year that would establish a separate inspector general to go out and deal with the fraud issues. We know, and this is what happens. You know, quite frankly, big government and big business have something in common. Oftentimes, the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. And I think that is painfully evident in the state of Minnesota right now. We got a couple of and I'll be honest with you folks, generally at these events I have tried to be somewhat nonpartisan. To hell with that filter. Right now I am going to be a little more partisan. We tried, and we got a few Democrats to join us in the Senate to actually pass the bill. It didn't get through the House because the governor put up a hissy fit and wouldn't allow his compatriots on the House side to approve it. He didn't want that additional oversight. I have listened in amazement at his comments the last 2 days, blaming Republicans for the mess that his administration has created. And that is, quite frankly, has raised my temperature level a whole lot. Because he is now portraying himself as the big fighter of fraud, and he's the one that allowed it to happen. Did he know exactly what was going on? I don't know. I don't think he wanted to know what was going on. And the reality of it is that we have to come up with, as legislators, apart from the governor, a plan to ensure that this type of thing does not happen again. And you know, the really scary thing about it, people, is that if Tim Walz was our vice president right now, we wouldn't even know to the extent of the fraud that's going on because it would have all been swept under the rug. It's the federal government that has helped bring this to the forefront. And I know yesterday in the news, I don't know if it's an accurate number or not. They said there are 2,000 federal agents that are in Minneapolis working right now. And quite frankly, I hope they dig deep and that they dig long. And then when they're done in Minnesota, they can go to Chicago, Illinois, and in California and New York. And it'll probably make our situation seem like peanuts at the end of the day. But this is what happens when you allow government to grow beyond a point where, quite frankly, people through their elected representatives have the ability to actually know what's going on. And so, you know, my 14th year might be considered one of the most fiery years that they've seen from Bill Weber up in the state Senate. Because I'm not going to put up with this garbage any longer. And anytime the governor or anyone else wants to blame me or my party, we all bear a responsibility. At the end of the day, the buck stops with us, the elected officials of the state of Minnesota. But I am not going to allow the governor to get by with the garbage he's been spewing the last 2 days.
Marge, I know that a few days ago you were one of a handful of legislators up in St. Paul to call for Governor Walz's resignation. And, of course, he is not going to be running for re-election. I just preface all that and ask you if you'd like to comment further on the question.
I'll say a little bit more on the question. I'm just starting my second year of my second term, and my first 2 years, the Democrats had the trifecta, and government moved at historically fast pace, which that's not how government's supposed to work. It's supposed to be slow and diligent, and working on doing what's right for our citizens and our state. Something I would like to work on is less omnibus bills. I think you get a lot of good things in an omnibus bill, but you also get a lot of bad things. And I think if we kind of look at things as single subject bills, that would slow down government and maybe eliminate some of the fraud that we're seeing also. The government should be more transparent, and I think everyone is seeing a lot more with all the fraud coming to light. It shouldn't be a Democrat or a Republican or an independent thing. It shouldn't be a black or a white or any kind of racial issue. It should be what is best for Minnesota, for our taxpayers, so that we are attracting businesses, we are attracting families, and growing our state for the greater good. Because right now we're going in the opposite direction. And the more people see that, the more they're paying attention, and the more that they are going to hold all of us as elected officials accountable, which we are.
All right. Next question that I'm going to ask, and just kind of keeping in the same area, if you will. We've established that Governor Walz is not going to be seeking re-election. What is going to be the impact, do you think, of this year's session? Is it going to be combative, as Senator Weber is saying that he will be? Are we going to get anything done? Are we going to be fighting the whole time? How do you realistically think the session is going to go? And I don't mean that from a negative space at all. I'm just, how do you think it's going to go? We'll start with Marge.
Well, that's an interesting question, and I can tell you every year that I have been up there, nothing's been the same each year. As far as getting along, I sure hope that we can get along and work together. That's our job, and I would think that's what everybody would want to see. That's what I want to see. Nobody can dictate what's going to happen, and I wished I could. I wish I had a crystal ball and could see everything that's going to happen, but I'm going to do my best to work and do the things that we are required to do as legislators working for you guys.
Bill.
Well, I would like to think that we could go back and undo some of the horrendous mandates that have been created in the last 3 years. Quite frankly, in the sessions of 23 and 24, the state enacted policies that are breaking our local school systems. According to my local superintendent, there were 82 mandates put into place in the last few years on our schools. In 23, they decided that part-time help at the schools needed to be placed under unemployment insurance. That had never been done before. They proceeded to brag about that they made a 4% increase in the per pupil formula funding. And they bragged about that was the largest increase ever happened. They've always failed to mention that half of that increase was going to be needed by the schools just to pay for that unemployment insurance increase that they created. Now we have paid family leave going into place. I had a superintendent in my district tell me the other day that, and not only that, they made it retroactive to January 1st of last year. So they were analyzing their situation, and they figured there's probably 12 people that could apply for paid family leave. He said, what am I going to do when I can't even find 3 subs and now I need 12? I know what's going to happen. It's going to be the students that suffer because they're not going to have the teachers in the classroom that they need to have. And if you look at what happened this past year, I serve as the lead on the Senate Tax Committee, and real estate taxes have become a very real issue in society right now. And what have we seen happen the last few years? We've seen increased costs being placed on our schools by the state of Minnesota. We've seen a shifting of responsibilities for many of our programs onto the counties. We've seen increase in mandates and shifting of costs to cities. And yes, I always say your real estate taxes are made up, except for commercial property over a value of under 150,000, are made up by local decisions. But the state has created a situation for our local governments, school, county, and cities, that is forcing them into seeing increased costs. Paid family leave is going to impact all of them, as well as our private businesses. And quite frankly, I would like to see, number one, a pause of all the mandates that have been created the last 3 years. And go back and actually analyze what is the cost, not just to schools, not just to counties, not just to cities, but to you. Because ultimately, all of us are the ones that have to pay that bill. And within 24 hours when this program, the paid family leave started, there were over 12,000 or almost 12,000 applications.
17 yesterday.
And you know what? Up there, the bureaucrats are saying that it's up to the employer to guard against fraud. Well, they can't even answer our employers' questions as to how the system is supposed to work. And so, there again, we just need some major changes at the state level. And I would hope that we could actually sit down and talk about these issues and the problems that have been created out here. Do I think that's going to happen? It's an election year. I don't think they're going to want to talk about anything, but we'll see.
Joe, we'll give you the same question, and I do have a couple of questions that relate to paid family and medical leave that we've been kind of covering, so I don't know if there's anything you want to say about that. Should the Republicans take firm control, Can they just get rid of it? Anything you want to add about paid family medical leave or anything else related to the topic of how you think the legislature is going to go?
Sure. Well, it's been hard to predict anything about this legislative session from the start of things. I mean, it took us an extra 3 weeks just to get started, and then it took us an extra 3 weeks to finish the last legislative session, and then we've been grabbing national headlines ever since then. It is worth pointing out on the paid family medical leave piece, you should all rest assured legislators are covered under that. So we have that as a benefit now, which just boggles my mind because there's no our obligation is to have a pulse and to show up for session, and if we can't show up for session, we get excused, and we still get paid. So I don't know where that comes from. But we all received a letter at the end of November letting us know that we're covered under paid family medical leave as well. So at least we know the people who wrote it were looking out for the right people with that. Part of the reason that we had an extra 3 weeks at the end of session was on the paid family medical leave piece. And there were negotiations not to just totally rip it apart, not to devalue it or take away from what people were already expecting at that point, but to ease off on it and to have certain sectors that would be unfairly impacted by it pulled back from that piece too. And after 3 weeks, there was no movement on it as we were looking at it and trying to negotiate a solution. And that's part of the reason why it took 3 weeks to get to a final conclusion at the end of session. That was one of about 4 sticking points to the whole session. And that was with Republicans having 67 votes in the House to be able to effectuate some kind of change. But there's just an unwillingness to have anything, at least until we see what was happening. And so we may start to see some changes, but it won't be this year on paid family medical leave. No matter who is in power after the next election, I think that once we see what the effects are and once we see how it actually goes, I think then we'll probably start to see changes. If it's going to be the doom and gloom scenarios that we hear, we'll probably see bigger changes. If it ends up being rosier, but then again, it's hard to trust the numbers that come out on this stuff anyway, because we have seen for at least 6 or 7 years now that the numbers that come out aren't always accurate or paint a rosier picture than is fair to do. I think this next session is going to be difficult. I'm glad that it's starting after precinct caucuses because it seems like those sessions that start before the campaign season starts are fractured anyway, and so there will be a little bit of dust settling before we get back into session in mid-February, and it'll be short. I think there are a few things, as I've been talking to groups about what they're bringing forward for legislative proposals this year. There is some understanding that there's not going to be a lot going on, but there are many minor fixes to bills that we passed this last year that can be fixed, I think, on a bipartisan level, but they're not the controversial ones. They're not the big ones that show up in questions here. And so there will be things that can be done. I think there's a willingness to do some of the things, but not the big things that are going to get a lot of people's attention. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay. This is more than 2 cents, of course. We're going to start with Senator Weber on this one. Of course, we've been talking about the fraud, and there was a lot of money that daycares were given. And, of course, the question is, how is the money given to fraudulent daycares going to be made up? And I guess I would add on to this, the federal government has said they're going to freeze money to daycare. So how does that get made up as well? We'll start with Senator.
Well, I haven't seen the plans that are coming out of the federal. The money that is being frozen means that, okay, it's there, it's not going to be spent. And I would say, hopefully, and within relatively quick period of time, that those legitimate daycare centers and providers will be able to get their money from the feds at that point. I mean, I understand why the Fed is taking the position that it's taking. When you have as many fraudulent centers as have shown up, at some point you just got to stop the funding and figure out who's legitimate and who isn't. Obviously, the state has not been very good at keeping track of that as we go. I mean, this is not the first time that daycare fraud has shown up. A few years ago, it was also showing up, and we took some measures at that point to try to strengthen the process by which the state is approving of these of daycare centers. I don't even remember. It just dawned on me last night. I had a bill, and we were in the majority in the Senate at that time, and I had 40 angry Somalis outside my office calling me a racist. And so I was at a committee meeting. My LA said, Senator, could you get back here? And I did. And I came over there. And I met with these people. And I said, there's nothing racist about this legislation. I said, if people are doing things fraudulently, they're doing it fraudulently. And I said, fraud is fraud regardless of the color of your skin. And I said, and so, and they finally backed off and left. But, you know, the reality of it is that how are we going to make up the money that's been lost? I don't know. I mean, we don't know what the numbers are yet exactly. I mean, there is estimate it's billions. How much has been sent back to Somalia? I have no idea. And nobody can actually give you an accurate number into that. But hopefully as this investigation goes on, it will be, if there's any money left here, it needs to be attached by the state of Minnesota or the federal government. And quite frankly, if there's assets sitting in Somalia, maybe the president will actually go get them. But it's going to be a challenge. And I just hope that, like I said, that the legitimate daycare providers can have their funds released sooner rather than later.
Marge or Joe, anything you'd like to add to that question about recovering the money? Excuse me.
Well, it is difficult, and the fact that it's been going on and at such a high rate is very concerning, and obviously something that we all need to look at closely. I just spoke with someone the other day that their legitimate daycare, they're losing funds and they don't even know if they're going to be able to stay open. So I'm hoping that this is something that we can work on diligently, because the people that are doing things the right way are suffering too. And it's just heartbreaking to me. And there is no good way to go about changing this when it's so massive and people are going to there's just these unforeseen consequences. And if we could get a hold of this and get in front of it instead of letting it go on for this long, I think that will help. But we obviously need to be working hard to get stops in place.
Anything, Joe?
Yeah. Well, specifically on the child care piece, as Senator Weber had mentioned, this has been an ongoing issue for the state, and this is why we have the Department of Children and Families in Minnesota, and it's not a part of DHS anymore, was that we thought several years ago that the best way to try and contain this these issues of billing and billing to people who aren't providing services was to have it be its own entity versus having it be part of the Department of Human Services, which is just a massive $40 billion a year or $40 billion a biennium operation that once you start to see problems in one area, it starts to spread. It was a culture issue, and there was even Democrats about 10 to 12 years ago suggesting that we split the Department of Human Services up into 5 different departments within that. And the only one that made it, well, the only 2 that made it through were the state operated services and the child care piece. But we have known that there are issues with the way that we operate this. And the Trump administration and the decisions that they've made to halt funding completely, I understand, to the points that Marge was making about that Representative Fulgeman was making about good providers also being part of that. That's a serious concern that we have with this. It's the same thing with how the Walz administration is approaching this as well with their predetermination piece. They put 14 different programs in the Department of Human Services on a alert status, and so every piece that comes in for billing has to go through an AI system for checking on fraud before the payment goes out in the first place. And so in those cases too, just like I was saying before, if someone puts AM instead of PM on a form and they're flagged for fraud, that can delay payment for up to 90 days. And we still can't get a straight answer. I've heard it both ways from the same department that if you offer services among 3 of those 14 areas and you offer services outside of those 14 areas, that all of your funds can be frozen. And we're seeing some of that going on now. Some say that is happening. Others say it wouldn't happen. And these are supposed to be the same people working in the same area for that. And so we're still trying to get answers on those pieces. We can't get anyone to go on the record. I can't even get the votes to have a public hearing about it to get answers on that. But it's happening both at the state and federal level that good actors are also being caught up in this. But recouping from the bad actors, which was what the question was to start with, I think we're having trouble with that. We're seeing the Feeding Our Future stuff and what that is looking like. You get 160 years to repay as part of it. You have people who swindle the state out of hundreds of millions of dollars and they have to pay back 1% of that over time. I mean, they're good at getting rid of the money too. I mean, these criminals aren't dumb. They're just very bad people. And then you have judges who are throwing out the cases on top of that and throwing out any kind of restitution. And so what are we supposed to do in the process of that, except for get better judges that actually take the rule of law a little bit more seriously and take taxpayer dollars a little bit more seriously so that we can get back and pay for the people who are actually trying to do a job that I've sat in this room for about a decade and listen to, especially child care providers, try to get the job done, try to provide services for people, try to get employers to support them because the state's not doing it. And here we are. We're stuck in this vicious circle of just nothing that's happening now. And it continues to be a problem that is being exasperated by a lot of different people.
How y'all doing, students from Fulda? And you think about running for office in the next couple of years, or?
I was first elected when I was 24. I had just graduated from college at the time, so.
I think I referred to you, not to you, but as Joe Boy Wonder Schumacher back in the
Boy
day.
Wonder, yes, had quite the baby face at that time, and hair at that time. So.
But no hair here, right?
No, I had to make up for it somewhere.
Yes. Okay, next question. Talking to an acquaintance of mine in town, he told me, and I'm pretty sure this was a joke, he said, I believe I'm the only one in the city of Worthington who has not applied for a conditional use permit so I can open up a cannabis dispensary. Now, if the Republicans were to gain control, can we get rid of this whole cannabis business? And I'm purposely wording that very vaguely because I want to see where it goes. Why don't we start with you, Marge?
Well, I did not vote for the cannabis bill, and I heard from sheriffs, I heard from many people that they did not appreciate this bill, and I think that the way that this bill went through, there was not a lot of thought put into it. It was just get it passed, and there's a lot of unforeseen consequences to that, too. There's a lot of dispensaries opening up, and people don't want them to open up, but they don't understand that comes from the state. It's not anything to do. The city just has to grant it. They can say what the location, but they can't really stop it. So, if I could undo it, that would be one thing that would be one thing that I would undo.
And Bill?
Well, yeah, I mean, the problems that are going to come about as a result of recreational marijuana are still to be seen, but they will be here. If you talk to states that have already done it, I serve as a representative from the state of Minnesota on what is referred to as the International Legislators Forum. It's international because it involves Minnesota, North and South Dakota, and Manitoba province from Canada. It was originally started to talk about flooding issues along the Red River, and it has grown to include other issues, sort of like government in general. I visited with an individual from North Dakota. They had the bill in front of them a few years ago, almost passed it, actually. And he had talked to the chief author in the Senate in Colorado who authored the legislation to approve recreational marijuana in Colorado. And the statement was made that if they could undo it, they would. The problems that have been created, the problems for law enforcement, the ability to enforce it, just due to the difficulty of detection, the traffic accidents, the robberies have all went up. And quite frankly, we as border communities, we're going to suffer the most because we're going to have all these people coming across maybe under the influence when they come, under the influence when they leave, and we get to clean up the messes. And the state, in its infinite wisdom, of course, last year, because of the budget problem, took away whatever money sharing was going to happen with our counties for enforcement purposes. So, this was, I think the legislation in the Senate had 10 or 11 committee stops. And there were changes made at every committee stop, and quite frankly, they still didn't get it right. Law enforcement, local officials would call the state of Minnesota and say, well, how's this supposed to work? How is that supposed to work? And as far as I know today, you still can't get a straight answer. So, no, I don't have great hopes for the success of this program. And if I had the opportunity to vote to get rid of it, I would.
Yeah, I guess I would echo the personal feelings. I would like to see it just removed entirely. I do not see that as a opportunity at all in any future legislature as it stands now, especially with the Trump administration changing the schedule of marijuana now for the intent of testing pieces of it so that we actually know what's going on. What I could see and would support, any changes that restrict what we have now or improve what we have now, I could see that happening as far as local governments having more say in what their ordinances can be and how many licenses, and have that be less prescriptive and have it be less of a state-run piece that the counties and the cities just have to abide by, and more allowing businesses to operate as they are based on local city and county code. I could see that as a real possibility in the next 4 or 5 years as I wouldn't say compromise, but as a smarter way of moving forward than what we have in policy now.
Next, and we'll go from Joe on down.
It is on down after.
Whoa. Lost his hair over that comment. What can be done legislatively to reduce the likelihood of school shootings in Minnesota?
Yes, that was another national headline grabbing piece in the middle of the end of the summer, beginning of the fall there. And when there was discussion about a special session this in September, we were looking at some of the options that we have there for that. And a lot of it came down to really beefing up the programs that we have in the schools and in the communities, particularly around mental health. And so I know one program that we were looking at heavily investing in would be the School Link Mental Health Program that has proven results. It's in the school systems, so it's really the idea of just trying to beef those programs up. And at the time, we had agreement with the Democrats in the House, and actually when we had that, I met with one of the senator who was also the victim of a gun violence this year, and we were talking about these particular things and how we address that moving forward. He had some other pieces that he wanted to address, but we wanted to start with the mental health systems within the schools and trying to do more with that. And I think that's a good starting point, and then wherever the discussions go after that, they'll go.
Well, certainly, mental health in our schools, mental health in general has been an issue that has been talked about. And it's unfortunate that with an $18 billion surplus when we had it, that more couldn't have been done in order to address the issue. And right away, of course, people always say, well, we need to outlaw guns. I'm sorry, you can outlaw anything you want to, but it isn't going to help. And Australia found that out with recent shootings down there. And so, but we do need to deal with the mental health issue. And we all understand that there are issues that arise in school. There are issues that arise in life, quite frankly, no matter what the age bracket is. And hopefully at some point in time, we can get to that discussion as to what can we actually do to help people who are contemplating those type of things. And so we'll see. That is one thing I think that dealing with mental health issues would be one area that probably we could find some mutual agreement on between the two parties.
Marge.
Definitely have to focus on mental health issues. I think that starts at home. I think that starts with having Christ in your life. It's like Senator Weber said, we can't outlaw guns. We can try. Australia did that. They also have shootings still. They have stabbings. I mean, we have to pick what else we can do. We can encourage knowledge and education with gun safety. I did speak to a class and they said that it would be a great thing to have their teachers carry. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just telling you that's what I heard from feedback from students. So there's lots of things that we can do to work together, but I think it's education, encouraging our kids, spending more time, maybe getting off of social media, encouraging our kids to do some stuff that is in a book or outside. There's lots of things we can do as families and communities, and we just have to work together. And I think more positive reinforcement.
All right. I'll just read this as it's written. After being taxed from every corner of our lives, why are we being so neglected when it comes to road improvements? We are driving on roads that have expired 10 to 20 years ago. This is a problem at every level of government, federal, state, county. It's like the corner of our state, this corner of our state does not even exist. So I guess from that, I'll just ask roads. Is there room to get perhaps more money for roads in the upcoming session? And let's see, haven't started with Bill in the last couple of times.
Well, I think that, quite frankly, there again, when we had an $18 billion surplus, I always commented. People said, "Well, you need to send it back," which I didn't really have a problem with. I said, "Well, what about if we actually met the needs that we have, like fixing our roads?" They go, "Yeah, that would be a good thing." Obviously, you see how far that went, and I think that we have, the other side will say, well, we got to raise the gas tax. No, we don't need to raise the gas tax. We need to have common sense planning and spending in order to accomplish what we need to get done. And it's a every so often phone call to district highway engineers, and it's not their fault either. They have to deal with what they're given as to a road problem within the district. And then all of a sudden something gets scheduled, well, then it gets postponed. It gets pushed back another year. And, I don't know. But quite frankly, right now, there again, the Department of Transportation at the state level needs I think, a total reorganization.
Marge.
Well, being on the Transportation Committee, that's a huge priority of mine, I should say. We had that surplus, which was my same idea too. Also, let's put some of that money towards roads that everybody needs around the state. Our state is huge. We have one of the highest states for highways in the country. Also, we had a train that they wanted to build to go from the cities to Duluth, and they had projected ridership, which was not going to happen. That we had $147 million sitting there in a fund for this train, waiting for a federal match, which didn't happen under Biden, and it's not happening under President Trump. So they took half of that money and funded our schools' unemployment that was mandated. So that money is going to run out. But again, there's $70 million that we could be using on roads around our state. And I think that that's definitely something I will continue to work on, is trying to get our budget. And that's one of the most important things that we're supposed to be doing, is having good transportation so that we can have good transportation for our citizens and continued commerce.
Mr. Schomacher.
Yeah, the same things there, and it's only going to get more expensive the longer we draw things out. And I think it's worthwhile to really put investments into those infrastructures so that we don't have to look at it immediately again. It's frustrating when you see the crews out and you get excited thinking, oh, something's really going to happen, and then a year after they're gone, the road's no better than what it was before. And I've been around long enough to experience both the highs and lows of that on different highways throughout the district. I also have this inability to stay at home, and so I'm driving to Iowa and South Dakota quite a bit, and you can always tell when you've crossed the state line, and it's really just embarrassing that we have that. I grew up with it being the opposite all the time, and now it's turned around. And I think we're starting to see, we've been talking trains versus roads for years, and we're starting to see trains getting shut down because the ridership just isn't there. The subsidies aren't there to support it anymore, and that can be helpful. But to get those dollars out this far is still going to be a challenge overall. But we do our best to bring out and to highlight these things, but it's not just this corner of the state. It's everywhere that these roads are being ignored. And I think Senator Weber made a good point that the department really has failed technology in this area. I mean, I think last I heard they're using technology from the 70s to try and determine what road surfaces and the quality of the roads are. That just doesn't work for us anymore. We have much better technology than we did 50 years ago to address these types of things and to build our roads better than they were before. But that just isn't a priority for enough people at the legislature.
We were supposed to go till 10 o'clock. We started about 10 minutes late, so I figured we'd go until about 10 after the hour. And of course, I don't know if you all have to go anywhere. But if you're willing to stick around and maybe talk to a couple of citizens if they want to speak to you or whatever, I don't. If you have to go, that's great. But I want to let people know that we're getting close to the end of our time for this morning. We haven't talked about local government aid yet, and of course, local government aid has been long critical to cities such as Worthington and all the other cities, of course, in your districts. So what does the future look like for local government aid in the 2026 and beyond? We'll start with Joe this time.
Yeah, I think it's a hard argument to make that local government aid should be reduced at a time when programs like paid family leave are a part of the system. I think that there are over 100 mayors in the state who sent a letter to the legislature and to the governor expressing the disappointment in how the entire state budget has been operated, yet they're expected to operate to the fullest efficiency within what the state gives them and what they're able to collect at a local level. And I'm thankful that to see the mayor of Worthington was on that list as well, calling out the legislature and the governor for how they're managing funds, yet how they expect other government functions to manage their funds. And so it's refreshing to see that kind of leadership. But as far as LGA goes, again, it would be very difficult to make the argument that that local communities can do with less at a time when the state is having so much trouble and also mandating so much on top of what's already been done.
Bill.
Yeah, I just don't, I don't think that there'll be anything that happens with local government aid. I don't think it'll be, I doubt that the governor will request it be reduced. I don't think it'll come out of the legislature to be reduced, but certainly there's not going to be any available money for increases either at this point in time. My thought is, number one, we need to get rid of mandates before we start talking about additional money.
I have to agree with both of them. We have to look at all of our state agencies and all of our funding and see where we can make better use of your tax dollars.
All right. Let's go down the line from Marge Fogelman, Bill Weber, Joe Schomacher, and just if you'd like to give a couple closing remarks, kind of either summing up what we've talked about or touch on something that we haven't touched upon yet.
Well, I really appreciate everybody being here today and all the questions. There's a lot going on in government right now, and it just behooves you to be paying attention to what's going on and communicate that. Any questions that you have, any concerns you have with any of us up here, that's our job. The more we hear from you, the better that we can do our job. So thank you for being involved. Thank you for showing up today.
Certainly, thank you also for being here today, and certainly with the issues that are going to be in front of us. It's time that all of us, regardless of our age, and recognize that government has a major impact on the lives we lead, and it impacts us at every level, and upper levels always impact the government at lower levels as well. And it's important that everyone understands that there are many needs that are out there, and there are always going to be a finite source of dollars. Remember, the dollars that we spend are your dollars, and so we have to do as collectively a better job of than what has been done under the current administration to safeguard those dollars and to use them in a common sense manner. I think if there's any issue that has come to the forefront, and as we talk about fraud issues, it's been the idea that common sense needs to prevail once more. And so hopefully we can get that message across in the 26th session.
Yes, and I'll echo the thanks for coming out today. Always important to know what the issues are, what's going on. I think that what we've heard from the national media, especially on just the disappointing news that's coming out of the state right now, I think it's going to get better before it gets worse. I think there's more that will be coming up. Well, we just got that behavioral.
You mean worse
health.
Before it gets better?
Yeah.
Yes, I do mean. I'm glad someone was listening.
That's your senator's job, is pay attention to him.
But yeah, that there will be more coming out, and then the response to that, like we talked about earlier, and the good actors being penalized for that, and how we recover from all of that. There's a lot of recovery that needs to go on. I guess one word of caution, though, in all of that is just because it's on Facebook doesn't mean that it's real. I think that's the biggest change over the last 16 years in what I've done in politics is that lies spread faster than the truth, and that's always been true, but now you have a mechanism where it goes pretty quick. And so that makes it difficult to be in this position because you spend more time trying to put out fake fires than actually being able to deal with real issues that are that are coming out. So it's easy enough. Sometimes we're not the quickest to get back to you, but we do make the attempt to get back to you as quickly as we can with that. And that's the best resource really for a lot of this, is to just be engaged more at that level than just liking and subscribing to things that you shouldn't, unless it's local radio stations.
And for that, you've received my endorsement. Anyhow, let's thank our elected officials for being here and speaking their mind, sharing their wisdom. You know, and I've said this before, and I'll say it again, they have an extremely difficult job. Just thinking on their feet in front of all you is probably difficult enough, but trying to make the best decisions for all of us, and we may not always agree with them, but they put their necks out there, and for that alone, they deserve commendation. Thanks for everyone for being here today. Thanks to Ford Worthington. Jamie Salinas is the executive director over there. If you haven't met Jamie, he'll talk to you a little bit about what Ford Worthington does. Chris Hohensee here as well. And Capital Conversations, I whiffed on the name when we started off. I said legislative breakfast. That hasn't been that for a while. Capital Conversations. Hope to have another one sometime during the session. We've tried to do that. If not, certainly at the end. They're awfully busy during the session. So again, feel free to stick around and corner one of them if you want to talk to them a little bit more. Otherwise, have a great morning, everyone.